Hey, let's talk about pentatonic scales. You know, that 5-note juggernaut that's the most used scale by instrumentalists and even vocalists in probably every music genre. Heck, you might have even been practicing some box patterns today before you watched this video. But what if I told you there might be a better way to play them than being stuck in boxes? Would you even believe me if I told you I was going to show you a way to string together pentatonic so easily that you could play a lick from the lowest note on your guitar to the highest note on your guitar without stopping? Well, even if you don't believe me, that's what this lesson is all about. Today, I'm going to show you how 3 easy to understand concepts are going to allow you to fly around the fretboard at will and literally become a master of pentatonic scales. And just to show you that I'm not talking smack, here's that lick. So, as with any activity we take up and might try to learn, we have to start with the basics. There's an old saying that you have to learn the rules before you can bend or break the rules. We learn the pentatonic box shapes first because they're easy. There's only 5 notes in the scale, and there's only 2 notes a string. It's easy to memorize. Having 2 notes on a string, it sets us up perfectly for alternate picking, which coincidentally we're often trying to get together about the same time we start learning our first scales. So it's a really perfect fit for that stage of development. And so we practice our boxes and we get them down cold. But as we get a little better, we start to realize, hey, I'm stuck in a friggin' box. Student after student says to me, all the things I play sound the same. All my solos sound the same. And if that's where you are in your playing and you're happy being stuck in a box, well, that's great. But if you're looking for a way to do a little more, well, you've come to the right place today. So to be able to bend those rules, we're going to start by looking at the structure of the pentatonic scale. And since the backing track I'm demonstrating over is in A minor, we're going to use A minor pentatonic. Now, if we look at the 5 notes of the scale and the root note of the next octave, we've got the notes A, C, D, E, G, and we're back to A. Now the intervals between those notes are as follows. Between the A and the C, we've got 3 frets or a minor third. That's a pretty big gap. Between C and D, we've got 2 frets. That's a whole step. Between D and E, we've got 2 frets. That's another whole step. Between the E and the G, we've got another 3 fret jump. That's a minor third. And lastly, from the G back to A, we've got another whole step. So in the pentatonic scale, we've got 2 1.5 step or 3 fret moves. We've got 3 2 fret or whole step moves. And we've got no 1 fret or half step moves. The fact that there's a lot of space between the notes gives the pentatonic scale its characteristic sound, which is kind of open and airy. And that gives us our first sort of secret move that we're going to use to break out of the boxes. And that is, we're going to use whole steps to shift between the pentatonic boxes. So check it out. Here's a diagram of A minor pentatonic patterns 5 and 1. If we put those 2 diagrams together, it looks like this. And right away, I notice 2 things. I notice those 3 fret gaps between some of the notes, and then by comparison, the smaller 2 fret gaps between the other notes. And the quickest way to break out of the box style playing and start moving freely up and down the neck with pentatonic scales is to exploit those 2 fret gaps and slide into the next position with them. So let's say we're starting with the G note on the low E string and we're playing in pattern 5. We could play G, A, C, and D, and then make a quick slide into the E note at the 7th fret. And now, boom, we're playing in pattern 1. Or we could stay in pattern 5 and wait till we get to the G note at the 5th fret of the D string to shift. Or we could play all the way to the C note at the 5th fret of the G string to shift. Or we could start from a different spot in the scale, say the E note at the 2nd fret of the D string, play up to the C at the 5th fret of the G string, shift, and play a little lick like this. That lick sounds very much like something Eric Clapton might play. So let's do the same thing with the rest of the pentatonic patterns all the way up the neck of the guitar. How about patterns 1 and 2? So the first shift point is between C and D on the low E string. The second whole step we see is from D to E on the A string. The third shift point we can take advantage of is between the G and A on the D string. And the next shift point would be from C to D on the G string. Then we've got G to A on the B string. And we've also got C and D on the high E string. So with these two patterns, there are several spots we can use to shift. And here's what you need to do to really get those under your fingers. And this really goes for all the patterns and shifts that we're talking about. Number one, you got to learn what you're looking for. Number two is to try them all out. Some are going to feel better under your fingers and sound better to your ears. And then number three, you just want to mess around and see what kind of licks you can come up with. And that's really the prescription for getting better at any aspect of guitar playing, right? You got to learn what you're looking for. You got to try out as many possibilities as you can. And then you got to get about the business of doing something cool with it. Here are patterns 2 and 3 combined. I'm sure you've got the idea now, so I'm not going to play them all. But the way these two patterns fit together, there's a whole step on literally every string. Looking at patterns 3 and 4, same thing. Whole step moves on every string. And lastly, if we check out patterns 4 and 5, again, the same thing. Now here's a super important point. If you're wanting to play an ascending lick, you're probably going to be looking for a whole step you can slide with your pinky or your ring finger like this. If you're playing a descending lick, you're probably going to be looking for a whole step slide you can play with your index finger like this. Now that's not a hard and fast rule, but it is a good starting point. I could totally make a liar out of myself and play an ascending lick that I play with my index finger. Or a descending lick that has slides with the pinky. I guess the point is to experiment and find out what really works for you. So, okay, Charlie, now we can move between two patterns. What's the big deal? What can we do with this that's so different from staying in one box? Well, there's two reasons. The second of which is being able to connect the entire fretboard, which we'll get to in a minute. But the first reason, and I think it's huge, is that it opens up all kinds of cool possibilities for phrasing. Now, phrasing is one of the things that makes you sound polished and professional, and it allows you to be really expressive on the instrument. So check out this lick in pattern 4 of A minor up at the 12th fret. We're going to play G and A on the G string, C and D on the B string, E on the high E, and then D, C, A, G, A, and E. Now, if I was playing in one box, that's something typical I'd play. And that's cool, but what if I play the same notes sliding between patterns 2 and 3? Now, the slides are built in, but what if I can add some more phrasing elements, like an extra hammer on and pull off? And then double up on the slide between the A note and the G note. And now we've got a lick that went from sounding a little stiff, frankly, to something that sounds more like Jimi Hendrix or Eric Johnson. Sliding around between patterns gives you lots of opportunities to play differently and more expressively than you would if you were just stuck in one box. Now, let's get about the business of connecting the entire fretboard, which brings us to our second secret move. And that move is we're going to mix ascending and descending patterns to find transition points between our boxes. So we've talked about moving between patterns by finding whole steps to use as transition points. But we can shift between patterns and still get stuck in the next box. Consider a lick like this one. Let's say we're taking a solo and we start down at the A minor pattern 1 on the C at the 5th fret of the G string, and we're going to play up to C at fret 8 of the E string. And then we're going to slide into D. But now I've run out of strings. I'm stuck. We can make the best of things and play down to the A on the B string. That's a nice short bluesy lick. But what if we're not ready to stop? What if the music's calling for a longer flowing lick? Well, here's your solution. We're going to descend through that pattern. I call it backtracking until we find another whole step that we can use to move up or down the fretboard. So here's our original lick. And let's say I wanted to go down the fretboard from there. I could descend from the D note at the 10th fret of the E string to the 7th fret of the G string, which is also a D note. And from there, we can shift to the C note at the 5th fret. And we're going to keep descending to the D at the fret 5 of the A string, and we'll shift again. And we can finish up our lick with G and A on the low E string. If we wanted to move our original lick up the fretboard, we could descend through pattern 2 all the way to the G at the 10th fret of the A string. We're going to slide into the A at fret 12. We're going to play the C and D on the D string and slide the E note at fret 14. And now we're in pattern 4 of A minor, and we're going to play up to the D at the 15th fret of the B string. And we're going to slide that into the E at fret 17. And we could play to the A note at fret 17 of the E string and give it a big old 1.5 step bend up to end the lick. I hope you're seeing now how you can basically escape from any box pattern you find yourself in by zigzagging back and forth on the fretboard until you find a whole step to transition with. Now, to keep the licks that you come up with using these shifts from sounding like the same pattern over and over, we need to find a way to break things up once in a while. This brings us to our third and final secret move. Create 3-note per string patterns with our shift points. Now, we can use these shift points to create 3 notes on a string patterns. And we can use those patterns to add some really different rhythms into the licks that we're creating. Now, the way we're going to do this is a little different depending on whether we're ascending or descending with our licks. Let's say we're ascending, like from pattern 4 to 5, and we're starting on the G note. We play G, A, C, and D, and we know we want to shift to the E note at the 7th fret. But rather than shifting there immediately, how about we hammer onto that note, pull off to D and C, hammer back onto the D, and then shift to the E. That would sound like this. And we could take that idea as far as we want to. We could stop there, we could go all the way up to the fretboard. And then if we're descending, we're going to do just the opposite. Let's start at the A of the 10th fret of the B string. We're going to play A, G, E, and D. And we're going to slide into the C at the 5th fret of the G string. And then we're going to hammer on to D and E and pull off back down to C. And again, we could have stopped after the first lick, or we can take that idea as far as we want to go. And this isn't something that you do with every lick that you play. But it's a tool that's going to be in your toolkit that you can pull out every now and again. You're going to break things up, make things sound fresh and innovative. And we can come up with licks like this one. So take these concepts and run with them. Come up with lots of fantastic licks of your own and go make some great music. If you like these concepts, here's another video about really cool pentatonic licks. I know you're going to love it. Get over there and give it a watch. I'll be seeing you soon. I wish you all the best with your playing. Bye for now.